Hello and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are watching from. Welcome to National Student Pride. And this is a panel session pulled together by UK Black Pride and Student Pride. I have the most amazing guest on the sofa with me, and it really is going to be about Black queer joy. And I've got a number of questions that I want to ask, but before we do, I would love for you to introduce yourself and also your pronouns. So I'll start with you.
Thank you, sis. I'm Kayza Rose, pronouns she and her. I would introduce myself as a creative producer, artistic director, BLM activist and filmmaker based in London.
Welcome, thank you.
Hi, I'm Fulani. I'm an artist, poet, Black feminist. I've been doing like small little campaigns for like model things like Levi's. And I was in Black is King, which is kind of like a low-key brag, but don't talk about it too much. And yeah, that's sort of me, my vibe and thing.
Hiya, my name's Azekel Axelle. My pronouns are they, them, and I am founder of Black Trans Foundation. And we provide 4 months of free therapy to Black trans and Black non-binary people in the UK. And I'm really excited to be here.
Oh my gosh, see, I told you, absolutely amazing guests. And you know, they're being very modest about what they do. So hopefully through these questions, through the Q&A, we'll be able to find out a bit more about what you do. So just by way of introduction, my name is Lady Phyll. I am the co-founder of UK Black Pride, which is the largest celebration of LGBTQI, and that's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and the rest of our siblings in the family of people of colour and Black people. I guess also what I should say is I'm also the executive director of Kaleidoscope Trust, which is a charity that works to uphold human rights for LGBT plus people. Now, it's fair to say that right now we have all experienced so much in terms of a lockdown, the way that the global pandemic has impacted Black and brown communities and also our queer community. So I wanted to just check in first before we even go into questions. And this is to all of you. How is your heart feeling right now?
Right now it's feeling full, because I'm sitting here with you and queer family. So yeah, I've been denied this for far too long. And so yeah, I feel full right now. Thank you for asking.
Thank you. Very.
Loved and also loneliness. I'm definitely missing certain people in my life, but also I'm loved by my family, and like I know I'm loved by friends even if I'm not with them physically at the moment. So yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah. Right now on this stage with my Black queer family, I feel at home, and I feel hopeful because it feels like coming home. It feels like I've been on a long journey without everyone, and there are a few more barriers to go before I'm able to, open that door and feel at home. But I'm now more motivated and determined than ever to choose myself, to tell myself that I am worth it, and to get back to those parts of me so that I can feel like this all the time. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I wanted to start with that because often, people talk about mental health, and we all have mental health, but it can become poor or ill mental health. So let's just remember to always check in with those that we love by asking them, how's your heart today?
Can I ask you a question?
You can ask
How
me.
is your heart today?
My heart is feeling ever so queer and excited. Black queer, Black pride queer, National Student Pride queer,
Yes.
and everything else. So let me read a quote, and I wasn't going to, but this quote, as this is about the future of our movements, it's from Audre Lorde.
Of course.
You do not have to be me in order to fight alongside each other. I do not have to be you to recognize that our wars are the same. What we must do is commit ourselves to some future that can include each other to work towards the future with the particular strengths of our individual identities. And I thought that that was ever so poignant as we're here celebrating and being part of National Student Pride, as we're here with UK Black Pride, but as we're here as individuals really wanting to talk about our lived experiences and what makes us do the things that we do.
Yes.
So I'm going to go to Azekel first. I feel compelled to ask you about the power and imaginations. You've set up Black Trans Foundation in a country that treats trans and gender non-conforming people with such contempt. Talk to us about how you imagined and then built this foundation.
Well, to be honest, I had no choice. I think when you get forced to a point where each of your identities somewhere out there, someone is committed to hating them, no matter if they know you or not, I had no choice. And I think that we are living in this society and being brought up in this society, we have no choice in the fact that our minds are colonized. And every day it's a step to unlearn everything that we've been taught, to take off that burden of hate. And I think one thing that colonialism and homophobia, transphobia, racism, ableism, all of it can't take away is our imagination. Our imagination is priceless because it just takes one thought to turn into a seed, you know, and then for that to turn into a tree that nurtures the community. For example, Black Pride, that started off as a thought. That literally had to start off as an idea in your head, and you had to have the love, the dedication and the commitment to believe in that idea. And when enough people believe in an idea, you make it reality. And I know that with our journey, we can't expect to fight for liberation and get to that point without first of all healing ourselves. And you, at the end of the day, you can lead a horse to water, you can't force it to drink. People, people have to. The only person who can heal yourself is you. So I thought, okay, what's the first step to liberation? Well, we're sick, we're tired, we're needing love. So let's set up something that brings my community that love and that makes sure that it's accessible as possible and lets them know that even in a world where it feels like you don't matter and you're not enough, you are enough. So now my community can begin to heal themselves. The next step is where we come together and we decide what we want in our life. So that's how I did it, and I won't stop.
Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, I said I wasn't going to cry.
Yeah.
So, you know, that brings me nicely onto you, Kayza. We've worked for a number of years on many different things.
Yes.
We've seen the tears and you're juggling a number of responsibilities at the moment. What is keeping you motivated to keep on making change?
That's actually quite a big question. And it has to start with love of self. And if you love yourself, you love your image. And if you love your image, you love your people. And so it's my mission to assist in creating sustainable change for people who look like us. You know, giving us permission like you did, that very first UK Black Pride, because I always bring this up and I promised I wouldn't make you cry, but things like that give us permission to take up space in very particular ways. And when you see things like that, it motivates you. When I think back to that and where we are now with UK Black Pride, it's motivating. There are so many people who are visionaries. There are so many people creating spaces, having conversation, having thoughts, and taking action. There's so many of them that how could I not be inspired to continue to do the work? I know I'm not on my own, you know? We have a whole family out there and I've definitely been very well supported. So, yeah, that's what keeps me motivated, seeing all of you doing all of this fantastic work. So, yeah.
Thank you. And there's that beautiful word that we use when we talk about chosen family. You know, often we don't have our own families, but the chosen family is what keeps us going.
Yes.
Thank you, Kayza.
Thank you.
Chloe, you're all glam. I'm always trying to cross my legs, but I can't do it, so we'll just leave that to you.
Let me relax.
It's like Naomi Campbell legs up to the elbows. So look, there's an age-old question and conversation about how chaos helps artists and poets create meaningful work. My question to you is, what do you hope your art does for the world?
Do you know, it's a really interesting question because in some ways, yes, chaos can contribute to the work. But for me, per se, I think like doing self-care and having a sense of self allows you to then, like for my work, express essentially who I am. I'm going to say self so many times. And so what was the second part of the question?
So it's about what do you want, what do you hope the world sees in your art?
And yeah, so in finding self and then having self-expression, I think it's people seeing like the different layers of myself. And because I do poetry work, it's a lot around emotions and feelings in my experience. And also people just connecting to the very like real visceral feelings that I'm trying to express within my poetry. And it also not to be so centered around my certain identities. And so people can like have a relation towards the sort of experience or feeling I'm trying to convey in certain poems. And then still be able to be like, oh, this is written by a Black trans woman and she's talking about gaslighting in this poem, which I have a poem around that. And yeah, that will allow like, hopefully someone to like open their mind up to like, oh wow, she's experienced this thing and she's expressed it in this way that's really touched me. Maybe like there's some like relation or understanding that we're like both human beings experiencing this world with all of its hostilities, but like we have souls and we're loving people. And I don't know if it makes change, but hopefully it's like connects with people. And I don't know if it can connect in the world, but yeah, people in London.
It does connect in the world. I recall, you know, hearing and knowing about you, and this conversation was taken to South Africa, and I had this conversation with Zanele Mahuli, and they were like, Chloe is amazing. So, you know, you're reaching, and this is because we connect. So my next questions to you all is really about where we've been. And I want to start with you, Kayza. You've been involved heavily within the Black Lives Matter activism in the UK. How has this movement changed since its inception in the US in 2014? And what is the difference between Black Lives Matter US and UK?
Unfortunately, since inception, there have been many more deaths. And because there have been many more deaths, there have been many more videos and conversations and many more ways for us to feel exhausted and excluded and set upon and unwelcome. But also, now we're living in the age of COVID, where we know that our communities are disproportionately dying and excluded from care. So it's another, everybody is going through COVID, everybody is suffering, but even in the midst of COVID, Black people are being killed. Black people are being brutalized. And, you know, we all saw what happened to George Floyd last year. And we all saw because we were forced to be still. And that's been kind of a pivotal part of why so many people have suddenly been like, oh my gosh, this is happening, you know? And just yesterday, you know, one of the officers who was charged with George Floyd's murder, was found guilty on all counts, which is fantastic. But on the same day, a 15-year-old girl was killed. So, you know, it's a win in terms of that particular case, but in terms of systemic racism, we still have a long way to go, you know. And the difference between BLM in the UK and BLM in the US and globally is location. You know, racism looks and feels different in this country than it does in America. And a lot of the time, the tabloids get a hold of it and say, you know, we're bandwagoning, you know. And it's like, well, are you then saying that there is no racism in the UK and that we have no right to say that our lives matter, you know? So it's the difference is location and the way that racism looks. But it's still racism, it's still wrong, and we still have to fight against it. We still have to say, this is not okay, and what do we do collectively to work together to make sure that we feel safer, you know? And it's not really about us doing the work, it's about our allies doing the work.
Absolutely. You know, something springs to mind when we talk about Black Lives Matter. It's about this systemic and structural racism that plays out, but also we're not jumping on any bandwagon.
No.
Black people have been experiencing racism from colonization to enslavement to slavery, and the way it has played out is based on white supremacy. So when we're talking about allies doing the work, we cannot have people relying on us for our labor to help educate and teach all the time. There's some responsibility, and I hope that everyone watching National Student Pride right now understands that if you are not Black or of the Black experience and haven't experienced racism in this way, please do your homework and understand how racism plays out because of white supremacy.
And also show up on our terms. Don't show up saying, oh, well, you know, this is what we've decided to do for you. Ask us what we need.
Absolutely.
You know, show up on our terms. That's allyship.
Yeah. And allyship is rooted in solidarity.
It is.
Solidarity has to have action behind it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chloe. I love how glam she gets. When you say Chloe, she's like, I'm ready. Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Well, I do want you to do something here because I wonder if you might read a poem for us. And it's hopefully a poem that speaks to your journey of discovery and self and reckoning. Would you share that with us today?
So I have a poem I wrote a while back, and it's kind of like breaking down and sort of redefining and thinking about masculinity. So also trigger warning, there's discussion of like abuse in it, but not precisely clear. I'll begin. Thy stem. My stem is weak, a spinal erosion. The fantasy that held it high, destroyed by repetition. A physical beatdown. What is love with him? What was the idea of being loved as a child, as a teen? More and more redefined. More and more arms up, defend thyself. Papa was the first boy to show me violence. And believe me, he loves me. When growing and moving through experiences with men, the tight grips, rough play, inappropriate touch, the first attempt of violation. If the body was sacred, why is it only cared about for when there's an exchange of pleasure for one? I no longer dream of sweet kisses, holding hands with bliss, strong embraces of affection, and him tell me he loves me. The me that is deeply in love with me. Belle's All About Love has helped repot this stem and roots, breathe new nutrition of love. I don't stand as tall, but I'm bending back, realigning with me. So that's the poem.
That was beautiful.
I forgot how heavy it was.
You know, you just said, I didn't know how heavy that was. That's really life right now for so many of us. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us, with Student Pride, with UK Black Pride. Yeah, because it takes a lot to sometimes unearth things that you have written way back when and share it with the world. So thank you.
Thank you.
And you're still glam. So, Azekel, I wanted to ask you, you know, as we stand on the shoulders of giants and those who came before us, it's so important to recognize and acknowledge them. How would you begin to talk about the impact that previous generations have had on your work?
That's a really great question. And I think that everyone in the justice work field understands something fundamental, and it's that most of the time the work that you're doing, the seeds that you're sowing, you're probably not going to be able to reap their benefits, but you understand the pain that you yourself went through, and you say, well, I've said to myself, never again, you know, not for the next generation and not for the generation after that. And that's why I'm so inspired by the generations who came before us, because they sowed the seeds so that we could reap them, and they made it a little bit easier for us. And I just hope that with the sowing of seeds, we can get to a point where we can just enjoy the garden, enjoy the fruit. There's no more work to do. And what I really respect about those who came before us is they understand that there is no liberation unless you want liberation for all. Like Audre Lorde said, I am not free while any person is unfree, even if their chains are different to my own. And I think that having an intersectional identity, so I'm black, I'm queer, I'm trans, and I know everyone also on this stage is able to understand that just because we are oppressed and marginalized in one way, we still have the potential to cause harm in other ways. And that's why when we're building these spaces, we're ensuring that we can make them as safe as possible, so that future generations don't have to swap one identity, you know, police one identity, put it back into the bag, and then let other identities show. For example, when I'm in a space full of black people, but everyone is cis-het, and so cis-het is short for cis-heteronormative, and it basically means cisgender and heterosexual. So if you identify with the gender you were assigned at birth, you're cisgender, and obviously heterosexual, I'm not going to explain that, you should know what that is by now. Wow, I completely forgot the point I was making. I have ADHD, so it's really easy for thoughts to just go through my head. What was I saying?
I love the point that you were making about intersectionality and also taking this intersectional approach to creating spaces.
Yep, that's so important, because so many times people think that the spaces they've created are safe, but you have to understand that just because you have that marginalized identity doesn't mean that you're going to have all the information and the knowledge, which is why we should be asking people with those identities, what do you need? Is this safe enough? Is this intersectional enough?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
And you never lost your train of thought. It was what you were meant to say at this precise moment.
Thank you.
So, look, I'm going to go into the next part of, you know, where we're going right now. And there'll be many people watching this who want to help change the world. And they'll be feeling frustrated and also energetic at the same time. So, Chloe, I'm going to come to you. Okay. She's getting her pout ready. You don't need to. You're just fabulous the way you are. Okay, what advice do you have for anyone that wants to take the first steps towards being a change maker? And the reason I ask you this is because I see you as a change maker.
Thank you. Amazing question. I would say, like, people have mentioned Audrey already, but again, her words are always transcendent through time. But when she discusses self-care, and self-care is an important pathway for community care, and that's really massively important for, like, my path, for even just, like, wanting to be a provider and nurturer and carer for my friends and my family. I have to do that internal work of love and care for myself. And that can be from so many different things. It's not always these, like, you know, I don't know, bath bombs or having a sort of like beauty day. It can be very much like, do I need a therapist, or I need to maybe like read a book that really like enlightens my day, or watch a TV show, or eat this really good meal, or sleep better, or drink more water. And these are very small practical things that is like, you're just like essentially almost like mothering and parenting yourself and caring for yourself. And then through that, you're able to like either become these thought leaders or community carers and stuff, or yeah, just anything that is like outside of yourself and a doing for others. Once you've been able to do it for yourself, essentially, I think it's almost impossible to just like not think about yourself and just go straight hard in. You can possibly still do a lot of work, but you might have a big, harder crash, and that crash may be harder to come back because you actually don't even know where you're at. So I think it's really important to like do self-care and just understand who you are, especially in the like radical Black self-care that Audre Lorde talks about.
Absolutely. And you know, there is nothing wrong with asking and reaching out for help and for support. You know, no person is an island on their own. You know, movements are not built by individuals, they're built collectively. But self-care is so important, so thank you for bringing this up. And let's continue to talk about self-care. So Kayza, I'm going to come back to you.
Okay.
You've got a lot of organisations under your belt.
Do I?
Such as AZ Mag, well, if you're wearing one, but we're not going to go there. Don't start stripping here. It's not that kind of panel session.
I'll try to contain my urge.
But, you know, AZ Mag, the work that you've been doing, you know, with a lot of experience also behind you as a leader in our community, what would you tell a younger Kayza, and what have you learnt that you would like to pass on?
Very good question. Super interesting. I would say bringing the self-care element into it, to actually exercise self-care. I was so busy, you know, making sure everybody else was okay, raising my children, you know, just showing up in ways that were unhealthy for me, and checking in with self. You know, I would definitely recommend to my younger self to check in with self. Are you okay? No, you're not. Clearly you're not okay. What steps are you, what actionable steps? Because, you know, sometimes when we like self-care, like you mentioned before, it's like sometimes those things are unattainable. You know, we'd all like to go on a nice holiday somewhere and be on the beach, and, you know, sometimes that's out of your reach for whatever reason. What practical things can I do to show up for myself, so that I'm pouring into self, and so that, you know, I can show up for others where it's not causing harm to self, you know? So I would definitely say, check in with self. And also, it's okay not to be okay. I mean, as you know, so long I was doing a lot of work in the background. So a lot of the work that I was doing, people didn't know I did, because of social anxiety and depression. And so I wasn't showing up for myself. I was so unhealthy, but still doing all of this work, but was so anxious to be on TV talking about it, or on panels talking about it. And it's like making sure that I show up for myself so that I can be okay, so I can proudly talk about the work that I'm doing, so I can proudly sit on panels and say, if I'm not okay, it's okay to say that on a panel. It's okay to say, you know, being on a panel makes me anxious, or whatever I'm feeling. That's okay. It's okay to show up as yourself on that day. That's what I'd say to my past self.
I like that.
Thank you.
And each one of us is here for you, for you, for you. And
For you.
absolutely, because trust me, I need it. Those times where you want to cry, those times where you feel like the community or even the wider mainstream LGBT plus community is not there for you. Even when those that still remind you that your being is not valued or respected, it's moments like this where we hold courtship, where we're able to synergize, connect, strategize, and be at one with each other and know that we've got shared commonalities that we want to go forward with together. So thank you. Azekel. That wonderful smile.
Thanks.
So you set up the Black Trans Foundation recently. What advice would you give to somebody who has imagined a solution and just needs that push to actually go and do it?
My advice is, first of all, you're in the best position to do this kind of work because no one knows what your community needs like you do. And I think living in a capitalist society, in an individualist society, it's ingrained into our heads that all this liberation work and community work has to be done on our own. And that's what capitalism wants you to think. It wants you to think two things. Number one, that you're alone and that everything that happens to you is because of you. And number two, that there's lack. Capitalism likes to breed this energy of lack. Oh, there's not enough resources. There's not enough money. There aren't enough houses. There's not enough for this. You know, you take these crumbs and you be happy with them. But honestly, there is power in community. And when you put community and imagination together, you are unstoppable. So my main advice would be, don't be scared, because we have no choice. I have no choice but to believe in a better world. I have no choice but to believe in a world where we're not only safe and surviving, but we're thriving, because this is not it and this is not enough. So I would say, try and gather a few people together, because this kind of work, you can't do it on your own. There's no point getting to the point of exhaustion to save your community, because you're part of your community. And like you were saying, it's just how you can't pour from an empty cup. I would also say that we are so powerful. We do not know our power until we give ourselves the chance to sit. So go and sit in a quiet space, just take a few seconds, close your eyes and imagine what your dream world would look like, because there is power in creation. When I started Black Trans Foundation, I didn't know anything about setting up a therapy organization. I didn't have a team. I didn't have any resources, but what I did have was my belief. And in 6 months, we now have 28 Black trans and non-binary people in therapy. We have a team of 3 Black trans individuals. We have 10 therapists. We are moving money. We are redistributing wealth back into the Black community. And the most important thing is that this is our own project. We're not answering to anyone. We're not begging anyone for crumbs. We're doing this on our own terms. So if you have that idea, that's already it. You've done the work, because all the resources that you need will come to you. It will be like your ancestors are moving worlds, moving energy to bring
Come on.
to bring
Don't
you
stop.
what you need. And the change, I don't think we'll ever have the ability to understand the change that we are creating, because those kind of waves will go on for generations, but it's all part of the greater plan. So if you need any advice as well, hit me up on Instagram, DM Black Trans Foundation, because we're gonna rebuild this world from the ground up. You can't reform systems, structures that are built on racism, built on anti-Blackness, built without us in mind. It's about forgetting about the old and focusing on the new. That's my advice.
Wow. You know,
Thanks.
I never want you to stop speaking. I want you
Thank
to go
you.
on. You are our ancestors' wildest dreams.
Hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't even talk. You know, when you said earlier on, before we were coming on stage, that, you know, you feel slightly anxious. Don't, because our ancestors speak through you. Don't limit your voice. Don't stop ever speaking, because there's somebody out there that is relating to you on so many levels. And me as an maturer person, you're giving me life.
Right.
Thank you so much. Everyone on this panel, you've just given, I think that's how the power of love, because love is universal and love is a feeling, and it's through love that transformation happens, because everyone here, you give me permission to love myself. So I'm so grateful. So I was anxious, but now I'm like, no, we're gonna change the world.
Come on.
Yeah.
Collect it all.
Yeah.
Come on, I know you've got some comments and some thoughts, you know, and I'm sorry, we're going to go slow, but I'm going to go off script because I really want us to respond to what our next generation said. I mean, you're all quite young, and there is a saying about we don't inherit this land from our parents. We borrow it from the next generation. So what are we going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to continue to do to cultivate and fertilize this land that means that we can see Black queer joy in spaces that we create, that is by us and for us? And I'm throwing it out to all of you.
Why do you keep looking at me then? It's like, all of you. I would say making sure that we don't do what some of the other generations have done to some of us, which is gatekeep. You know, bringing younger people in, bringing older people in who feel excluded, just bringing communities in, making it intergenerational, making sure that we actually share resources, making sure that we share ideas. You know, I love what you said earlier about imagining, sharing our imaginings, making sure that we are holding space together. And also giving grace when we get things wrong, because society definitely does condition us into that scarcity mindset, as you mentioned earlier, that you get that one shot, and if you make a mistake, that's it. We don't want to work with you. You won't get that funding. We won't support you. It's like, that's when we need to pull us in more. You know, when we feel like we've made a mistake, when we feel like, you know, we're low, that's when we actually need our community a lot more than some of the other times, you know? So it's expressing that love even through difficult times is what I would say, you know, pull community in, you know? When you see somebody struggling, pull them in, ask if they're okay. Sometimes they'll lie to you and they'll say they are okay, because that's, again, part of our conditioning. But keep persevering, because maybe that on that 8th time, they might say, you know what, I'm not okay. I don't know how to get help. Can you help me? You don't know. But as long as you show up, that's what you can do.
Thank you. Intergenerational is important. We often forget that, and it's how do we learn from the past and how do we bring in the future in order to really create meaningful spaces, meaningful dialogue and meaningful conversation. Chloe.
Repeat, sorry, the question.
So I think it was about responding to, you know, just where we're at and how we come together and, you know, the changes that we want to see. You've already responded about being a change maker, but what Azekel and Kayza have been saying about just the us. I really want to make this about the us, because people will be watching, some who have no clue about our Black queer communities. How do we make sure that we're centering our needs, what we say, what we want, and how we want it?
I think there's, like, I've just been having a lot of conversations recently about, like, Black queer communities and stuff. And I think there's, like, such a great importance about, like, our identities and, like, how we share it in a space. But I think sometimes, like, we forget that, like, these identities, we have souls, we have humans behind these identities, and, like, we make mistakes, we slip up. And I think it's important that we're just a bit more loving with each other, and especially the way, like, social media works at the moment, like, there's sometimes so much of a, like, bombardment when someone in the community, a thought leader or provider or like a community organizer does a slip up or makes something wrong, and to push them out or to like not listen to even like their apology or whatever. And I think sometimes it's like this community is small in many ways, and I think it's important that we don't just, you know, push people out over mistakes. I think it's important that we talk to each other, hold people accountable, and like also remember, like, you know, again, we're human, we're souls, we're not perfect, we're flawed. Like, I'm not a perfect Black trans woman. I've been in many situations where, because of how I've understood my life and my position, I haven't been able to like know how to, I don't know, hold non-binary folks and give space to them. I've had to learn that. I'd slipped up, I made mistakes. And luckily the people that I was around gave me space to do that. But like, sometimes we kind of have to acknowledge that. And I've given space to like cis Black women that I've been in community with. And when they've slipped up and made mistakes, but like, I know they've been loving with me and I've been loving back. And so those mistakes are not going to be something I hold them for like the rest of our like interaction. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that does. And you know, sometimes it's not even about answering the question. It's about what comes from here that needs to be heard and also needs to come out. So thank you so much for that. I see you all as so transformative and transformational in what you do. And I look up to, or I look across and I look to the side, I look up, I look down to everyone in our communities that's holding space and remembering that we do get it wrong sometimes. And this is not about cancelling out people. This is about making sure that we can look at our areas of improvement, because that's important. So I'm going to have to wrap up, because as much as I don't want this conversation to finish, I'm going to end on something I really want you all to answer. You know, in all that we do and how we're facing and remembering our capacity for joy, which is so important, our Black joy, our Black queer joy is beautiful and it's necessary. This is a question for each of you. What is bringing you joy at the moment?
That is a very interesting question. I would say everything that I'm doing at the moment. As you know, I'm developing a new project, which I've been working on for a year. And it's developing really nicely. You know, we're making plans in UK Black Pride. And as you know, I am a member of UK Black Pride. So I love the work, and some of our new team members that have come in, you know, the work that I'm doing with AZ Magazine, Miss Kimberly's Life, Family Dinner, Allies Corner. There's so much joy to be had in doing this work, in pulling in community. So that's what's bringing me joy, pulling in community.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Music. So simple, but basically I hadn't listened to any music for like a week and a half, and then I was kind of spiraling a bit, and then I just heard something in the background and I was like, I haven't listened to music and dance, and I just did that, and it just gave me so much joy, and it just reminded me like that my body can be a space of joy, and yeah, that's for me.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I guess for me, patience. And this one goes out to my trans family, specifically my Black trans family. I think, you know, there are a lot of tweets on the TL, Monday, 12th of April, once everything opens, I'm going out, I'm going to go back to normal. And we have to really just be aware that we have gone through a global traumatic event that has changed us forever. And we're in between the point of the trauma and then experiencing the PTSD. And just because everything has started to open up, it doesn't mean that you're going to go back to the way you were, because you can never go back to that place. But to my Black trans fam, I understand that with summer coming, it's going to be more difficult to show your body and to wear less layers. So I just want to say, take your time with it. Because growth is being at peace with change. So just understand that we're in changing times, and letting go frees up space to grow. So with my dysphoria and how I feel about my body, during lockdown, it got to the point where I didn't feel that I would be good enough to ever go outside again. You know, my anxiety has gotten a lot worse, my social anxiety, and I didn't know who I'd become. And I was mourning who I'd lost. But you can not only get back to that person, that joy that you had before the pandemic, you can go a step further and be even happier. So just give yourself the time and the patience. You know, take it day by day. Maybe go for a walk. Maybe try and have a look at if you can buy a binder. Order those clothes online. And even if you feel terrible, you've taken that step. Even for me to be here today, wearing clothes and being on stage and on camera was a huge step for me. And that took patience. So that's my current joy. Yeah.
Wow. So look, we're coming to the end, and I really want to thank you all for sharing this space, this time, this conversation. I'd like to thank National Student Pride for having us to hold this conversation that we own, that we take, that we move forwards. And I want to task everyone that is watching National Student Pride to do your homework, to find out about Black and brown, QT-POC, trans communities, and find ways to support in solidarity and allyship, but making sure it's rooted with action. My joy is that I breathe. And I breathe deeply. My joy is that I can wake up each day and be able to have conversations like this and build movements. My joy is that I can work with international human rights defenders who have a very, very different time to us, even though our pain and our struggles are very real. But breathing is what is my joy right now. So thank you, Student Pride. Thank you, UK Black Pride. And I'm going to shamelessly plug that on the 2nd to the 4th of July, UK Black Pride will be taking place in a digital format, but there is something for everybody. So get involved, touch base on the website, follow us on social media, but importantly, follow these amazing change makers that are talking about movements and futures. Happy National Student Pride.